Hello, and welcome to the Studio Sessions Pottery Podcast. Today, my guest is Hope Limyansky Smith, a full-time high school ceramics teacher, studio potter, and digital educator whose work blends a mastery of craft with generosity of knowledge and spirit. Known for her intricately carved surfaces, thoughtful instruction, and calm, encouraging presence online, Hope has built a devoted following of makers who turn to her for both technical guidance and creative inspiration. Also the artist behind Limyansky Studios, Hope features functional pottery with elegant surfaces, but she's just as passionate about teaching others how to develop their own voice in clay. So whether it's in the classroom, on Instagram, or leading hands-on workshops like at our recent Soda Fire weekend at Clay King, Hope is shaping more than pots, she's shaping community. So, Hope, to begin, if you had to name the mission you're on, not just as an artist, but also as a teacher, maker, or content creator, what would you say that mission is?
I would say, honestly, my mission as a human is to kind of just do something good in the world. And I think that's very broad, but I think that really plays into kind of everything that I do. I think if I can be that person to spark joy in someone's life in some capacity, even if it's maybe a short post or a 60-second video or an hour-long class or a year-long class, I think my center mission is always to encourage and be uplifting and to bring some sort of positivity into everyone's life when possible.
Now, I've recently had the chance to hear a lot more of your story because you came to Clay King and told a lot about it in the workshops that you led. But for those who are just tuning in or maybe listening to for the first time, can you share your journey into pottery and what that looks like as it begun to where you are now, kind of balancing teaching and making?
Absolutely. Do you want what time limit are we looking for this story?
I have the rest. It's Friday. It's the rest of the evening for me is clear. So the floor is yours,
Okay,
as
fabulous.
much time as you want to give.
Okay, great. I never know how in depth to go when you're like, summarize your whole life. So here we go. So I think usually I tell everyone really my artistic career started in high school. Up until the high school point, really didn't have the opportunity to take a lot of art classes. I have dyslexia, and my parents put me in private schools, which were definitely the right fit for me academically. I needed that smaller setting. But oftentimes, unfortunately, in those settings, you really had to pick between like a bonus academic class or an arts class. And so I was usually in those bonus academic class situations. So for high school, I got to go to public school, and that was kind of the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life. I walked into the art room and I just kind of never left. So I've always been an artistic kid. I don't think this was a shock to anybody that I was living there as much as I was. But I really got to take my first ceramics class, which I just had an absolute blast in and kind of fell head over heels quickly. And it's really the first time that I felt like I was just able to walk in and do something. In a
Hmm.
lot of my other academic courses, I felt like I needed to study extra, I needed to work extra hard, I needed all of the extra assistance. And this was the first class where I felt like I could just be myself and that was all I needed to do. So it was a really wild, life-changing experience for me. And I'm fortunate to have a family that was fully supportive of that. They saw that I clicked with the arts, and then they allowed me to enroll in outside ceramics classes because I just really had a passion for it. So I started to take classes at the Johns Creek Arts Center. I was in the high school classes because that's what fit best with, or not high school, sorry. I was in the adult classes as a high schooler because that's what fit best with my schedule. And shortly into those classes, I had another instructor at the Art Center reach out and ask if I wanted to be her assistant. And I said, sure. And it was for high school wheel throwing, which I had never done at that point, and I was still in high school. But she allowed me to come in and to assist for her. And what I didn't know at the time that ended up really changing my entire life is that her professional job was to train teachers. And so I was not only learning how to throw on the wheel, I was also learning how to teach. And I don't think I ever knew at the time that that's what she did and that that's what I was really absorbing. I think I thought, oh, I'm just absorbing a lot of clay knowledge, but really I
Hmm.
was learning how to teach and how to run a classroom. So I went through high school, basically just committed my entire life to doing art in some way. And for college, I ended up going to Kennesaw State University, where I actually started as a sculpture major. So I did that for About a year or so before I really decided to wander back into the ceramic studio. And then I shortly changed my major over to ceramics and did that for a couple years. And then my senior year had the life crisis that most of us have, which is I need a job. What is that going to look like? So I thought, well, we'll enroll in some education classes. And so I did. I looked at double majoring for a while, but it ended up not being the right fit for me. So I took a couple of those education classes, finished out my ceramics degree, graduated with a bachelor's of fine arts degree in ceramics. And then simultaneously during my senior year, I got a call from an old Spanish tutor of mine. Again, everything ends up really connecting in this beautiful way because she met me in middle school when I was a middle schooler. And again, I didn't have access to those art classes really. And so I had her as my tutor for Spanish. And she called me and she said, hey, we have a ceramics position opening up at our school. I know you're about to graduate with a degree in ceramics. What do you think about sending in your resume? And I thought, sure, why not? So I did. And I ended up getting the job to the shock of many of us. But I got the job and now I'm entering my 8th year of teaching high school ceramics full time, which is crazy. I can't believe I said that. It's 8th year. It's wild.
That's it. Time goes by so fast, and I think we just continue saying that until we are ancient, and that's the
That's
track
what
of
I've been
things.
told.
Yep. But I can really relate to the feeling that you described about walking into an art class for the first time and then having the ability to be yourself. I went to a small little school that didn't have any art classes at all, so I'd never had taken an art class until I got to college, and that's where I found clay too. Um, so I loved hearing how, like, some of our arcs are really similar in that way, and I enjoyed hearing about that. Um, it's interesting how we can look back on the threads of our life and see how everything kind of plays together really well. Along the way, were there any challenges that you encountered that, looking back, might have like taken you out of the ceramics world or the clay world? Like, what kept you here? Was it all providence, or like impromptu
Yeah.
meetings or teachers reaching out, or is there anything that like you latched on and grabbed hold of and anchored yourself to?
I think that, gosh, there really are so many threads. Everything is so interwoven. And the more I look back, the more I see how, like, every small decision really did impact the next, that did the next, that did the next. I would say that, I was always drawn to clay. If you look at my parents' house, it is covered in little oven baked clay sculptures. So, weirdly enough, I think ceramics and clay has always been who I am. I would say though that really it took me a while to realize that that's who I am. I definitely, wandered through other mediums for a very long time, and I'm glad that I did. I think they all taught me different lessons, but I would say for the most part, I feel like I just kept falling into ceramics. I never really intended to do ceramics. I just kind of kept falling into it, if that makes sense. And it
Absolutely.
took me a while to realize like, oh no, maybe this is who you are.
It has a way of sinking, getting underneath your fingernails in
Oh,
the deepest of
literally.
ways. Yeah. Although you keep yours immaculately clean.
I do. I really
Okay.
do.
So I know you said 8 years ago, or it's been 8 years since you started teaching, but like, what can you timestamp teaching to where you are now? Like, what year was that?
Yeah, I graduated, let's see, I graduated high school 2014, graduated college 2018. So
Okay.
I think I did that math right. Yeah, that sounds right.
That sounds about right.
Yeah,
My short math is atrocious, but sounds right to me.
me too. Nobody correct us. If we're wrong and you're listening to this, please don't let me know.
Don't say it in the comments section.
Nope.
So in that period of time, since about 2018 to where you are today, I've followed your work for quite a while on social. I don't know exactly when that journey for me began following along in your creative process, but I can already see the growth. For you, how do you recognize that your artistic voice or your goals have shifted or changed in that time?
I would say my artistic voice has majorly changed since 2018 when I left college. I think a lot of people, if you pursue a degree in whatever arts realm that you're in, for me, it was ceramics, we have that big body of work that we did in undergrad, and you become so attached to it. And
Mm,
then you go through this huge life change where now you're not a college student anymore. You're maybe not a student for the first time in your life, really. Um, and and it feels so different. So the work I felt needed to be different. I feel like I had a very definite style in college in that era. And then I left and I was starting to learn how to teach. And I feel like my work went through this awkward phase.
Mm,
where I don't know that there was direction. I feel like that also fits maybe your first year of teaching. You're just trying to make, you're just trying to do. And I think my pots look like that. They look like I was just trying to make, I was trying to do. There wasn't necessarily a specific style. And then I would say my work kind of flows perfectly with my teaching, right? We get past those first couple of years and you feel like, okay, I know more about what I'm doing in my classroom. I feel like then I knew more about the direction I wanted my work to take. And really the pandemic is when I started to really push making a lot of work and documenting it on social media. And I would say that kind of period of time is when you see the biggest shift in my work and you see the biggest kind of voice start to appear after it
mm.
had been kind of dormant for a while and going through all these awkward phases.
That first couple of years after school, when you're on your own, you don't have the structure anymore. I've heard people describe it as your first year of parenting, where it's just survive. And
Yes.
it's a crucial and kind of like make or break moment because you are forced to come up with all of this direction on your own steam, and you don't have deadlines or projects forcing you to create. And if you can make it through that first like gap right after school or like right after that big transition, I feel like your chances of being able to stay in the craft or stay in like a creative field improve drastically. It's just those first couple of, like awkward years of I don't know what I'm doing, but I know that I'm doing it.
Yes, 100%. And I feel like the more artists that I talk with, the more that that's a common thing I've noticed. So I feel better about it when I've heard others say that they went through the same thing because I know for me, I felt a little bit like, how did I go from having this like really definite style to
Hmm.
whatever the heck is going on here? But I think it's just an awkward phase. It's like middle school, right? We all have to go through it at some point and regain our grounds of where we are and who we are and what's going on.
Yeah, it's a big transition.
Yes.
So, how would you say you found your voice? What's drawing you to how you create?
So I would say that one of the things that really propelled me to get into carving was I've always been attracted to like surface decoration in some way. I know technically carving isn't, I don't know if it is surface decoration or not. We're going to count it. But I've always been drawn to things that are like very textural and have a lot of a sculptural kind of form to them. And I really remember I had gone to my first NCECA and I had really saved up to buy my first carving tool and I bought just one and it just
Hmm.
took one for me to get really hooked on it because I went to NCECA as I do now and I just looked for all of the cool things and tried to buy everything that I could afford. But one of the things I brought home was a carving tool and it was like love at first swipe. I started and I just could not stop. I know at that time I made a big shift from working with pretty much just white clay bodies to a speckled clay body. And that came about because I was starting to analyze, again, this thought of I didn't have a style, I didn't have a voice at the time. So I started to look at, well, what kind of things am I really attracted to? The brand Madewell is one that always comes to mind for me when I think about where my style originated from. I
Hmm.
love the store Madewell. I love the textures. I love the colors. I think all of that is very well composed. And I think really I thought, well, Madewell would probably have speckled clay. If they were a clay, Madewell would be speckled clay. And so I think that's what really pushed me into trying that out. And then I've always been very minimal with my glazing. I used to in college rely purely on soda firing, no glaze added
Hmm.
at all, just entirely soda. So I knew, in my new setting, I didn't have access to a soda kiln. So I was like, well, what can we do that's very minimal in glaze? And I thought, well, Madewell would probably just use like white. So that's really what stuck with me as well. So white glaze, speckled clay body, and then just carving until I couldn't carve anymore.
And it's crazy how deep you can take just one thing, like speckle clay, white glaze, and there's such a variety to it. And
Yes.
I think love at first swipe is probably a dating app tagline somewhere, but I think Diamond Core should probably use it.
I think they should. Diamond Core Tools, hit me up if you want to collab.
License that tagline.
Yes, I should.
So speckle clay, white glazes, and I've seen this in your work. So as you're creating these forms, these surfaces, can you take us along your creative process? Like from, do you have an idea of when you start to what it's going to look like in the end? Or do you kind of go through it organically?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a bit of both. I think you do have to know, and I think let me backtrack for a quick second here.
Sure.
I think one of the things that I fell in love with the carving concept really is as a method of creating art was the intentionality that you have to have with it. So, really, when you sit down and you throw on the wheel, you do already kind of have to have an idea of how you might carve the piece, simply because you need to figure out where you need to throw thicker and where you need to throw thinner. So I spent a lot of time really feeling like I was learning how to throw again for the first time now that I knew I needed these thicker areas and these thinner areas. So that part of the process is extremely intentional. And then the selection of the tool is also very intentional. I have to really think about what kind of a tool I want to go with. And then when it comes to the actual creating of the pattern, that's where it does feel more organic to me, which I think would surprise people. I think that's the area that you think would be the most structured, but
Yeah.
that's actually usually the area that I feel the most comfortable just kind of going with it. I don't map things out for the most part. I just kind of start and move. And I do have kind of a routine of pattern, not a routine of patterns. I have a group of patterns that I use fairly often that I feel more comfortable with. So I really feel like I can just look at the piece. I know how thick it was thrown in areas. I know how thin, and then I can just kind of go. And
Hmm.
I don't have to plan anymore, you know?
Do you have pieces that you look at while you're carving to say, like, I want it to look more like this, or do you just free flow at this point?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know that I've ever looked at a piece and looked at something while I carve. That would be a cool thing to try though, but I don't think I've ever done that. I think I've always it's just me and the piece in that moment and that's all that my attention's on.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to approach your work too, because then you have, I mean, that's, I don't know, for me personally, ADHD thrives on organic free flow of ideas and thoughts, and I'm just hyper focused on one thing and not
Hmm.
trying to pull too much from outside. So I think that's probably the way a lot of clay responds best.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a balance,
For
control and
sure.
then lack of control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's the way out? So I have a few different segments to the questions I want to ask you today.
Mhm.
But before we move on to like more of your teaching and education styles, do you have anything else that you want to talk about in your process or aesthetic that you think people should know about, or questions you often get asked?
Usually the thing I don't talk about online, which would be fun to convey here, is kind of the meaning behind the work. I usually really on social media, I have my teaching side and you see all of that. And I have the carvings which I post, but I don't often talk about why I do it. We've talked about how I've fallen in love with carving as a tool, but I don't really talk about what the work means to me. And that is something that I would like to share more of. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that online. This is a very good format for that because I feel like I can just talk about it. But really, the work for me post college that's the cap we're working in right now, post college work. It really so much models what I was going through in my life. I feel like I mentioned earlier, you really have to learn how to throw again in order to carve a lot. And I feel like that is very reflective of getting out of college, learning how to be a teacher, learning how to do all these things on your own. And so in that phase, I feel like those pieces really represent what I was going through there, just trying to understand who I am. And I feel like the more that I worked on those pieces, the more that I got to understand carving, the more I was understanding who I am as an adult.
Hmm.
So just the traditionally carved pieces feel like a very, very strong representation of me in that time of my life. And then I kind of segued into doing a lot of these pieces where I would carve them, but then I'd also go back with a surgical scalpel and remove a lot of the clay. Those are like my luminaries, is what I typically call them. You may think of my holiday trees where they've got the cool little swirls.
Yes.
And I also do some taller pieces you put candles in and that kind of stuff. And that was very representative of a really difficult time in my life when I felt like I knew who I was, but I unfortunately went through a couple years of a lot of loss. I lost a
Hmm.
lot of loved ones in a very short period of time. And I felt like there was a lot that was being taken away from me. And in a way, with the clay, what I was really doing when I was working on those pieces was reflecting on all of those people. And what I love about them is I was able to take away a lot of the clay, but then you could put this light in there and it became this whole new form, right? It still had so much to it. And I felt like it was very good for me to be working on that work while I was going through a hard time because it reminded me that we can lose those things, but then we can become something else that is so much greater and so different. And I love how the luminary work filled the space in a way that the traditionally just carved work simply cannot, right? If those pieces were there and it didn't have those openings, it could never do what what that work is doing. So that's kind of the second era, and then this I sound like Taylor Swift, I'm sorry. And then the new era that I'm working in that I'm very excited about that I haven't shown any work from yet because I feel like I need time to sit with it, but I'm really investing my time in porcelain. And the concept being now that I am working on some pieces where they are carved, but they're not cut, but they can still glow because it's porcelain.
Right.
So that is representing kind of this healing from that difficult time. And I also like it because it doesn't need any glaze. Porcelain is just porcelain and you can sand it and you can get the shine and the gloss. And I feel like in a way too, that's felt very empowering to work on because it's like I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm not hiding behind any glaze. You can see the clay for exactly what it is. And I'm so excited about it. Like I said, I'm not ready to post those yet. I feel like
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
still in like that beginner phase where you're like, okay, I would do this differently, I would do that differently. But yeah, those are kind of the three big segues I've noticed in my own work over the last couple years. And I really have been thinking about them a lot since I was preparing for that clay painting workshop we did together. And I
Yep.
mentioned it briefly, but yeah, that's something I don't share online that I now am feeling like I'm in a place where I'm ready to let people know more of why I make what I make.
I'm really glad you're talking about it more because I think having the conceptual layers that's behind the utilitarian pieces, or even if they're just decorative, I think it adds so much. I mean, even just as a viewer, but also I'm sure to the people who collect your work or follow you in depth would like just adding that information helps understand and add so much more meaning behind the pieces you create. Because at the end of the day, like we are potters who are creating things and they are representations of ourselves in some form or fashion. And so being able to communicate through your work, I mean, these are vessels. They're going out to live in the world to serve people and they're serving the way that you have experienced. I think it's important. And thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for listening. And I feel like, people don't I think when you're making like a planter, people are like,
Mm,
"What do you mean this planter has deep meaning?" You know what I mean?
right.
But I'm like, "Oh, it does though." Because like I said, that era where I was just carving, not cutting, just carving, for me it was, well, yeah, it's a planter. This is me. And then you get to add a plant to it. You get to bring your own life to it. Like there's so much into those items that I think can be so overlooked as far as conceptually, people just don't know that there's more going on, but there's
Oh, yeah.
always more going on,
Always. Well, I heard
always.
somebody say once that the work works on you more than you work on it. And so as we're creating things, we are bringing that process, internalizing it. And while people might look at something and say, that's just a pot, it's just a mug, it's just a planter, there really is a lot more to it because we as people are making and pouring ourselves into them. And I think it ties back to what you said in the beginning of what your mission is to bring joy through whatever you do. Even if it is just a planter, it's a part of you that's living in somebody's home. It's giving a home to a plant and it is bringing joy, but it's also representative of what you've gone through.
Absolutely, and I think that's maybe where I was nervous to share with people the meeting because I think I'm like, "Oh, I don't want them to look at the luminaries and be like, thinking about these," like I said, I experienced a lot of loss, and that's where those stemmed from. So I think that's maybe part of the reason that I had such a reservation in opening up and sharing those things because I love that people can look at my pieces and just get happiness, I
Hmm.
think that's amazing. But on the flip side, I think, I'm learning to understand in life that you can have two things being true at the same time, right? You can look at the piece and you can love it, but they could also maybe benefit from hearing why I made it and what I was going through. I struggle with accepting that both of those are equally good.
Hmm. Yeah, it's hard to take two truths and put them in the
Yeah.
same thing. But the important thing is like we as potters are kind of like alchemists, where we can take these ingredients and turn them into something. And so you're just doing that with life experiences. You're taking the bad, turning it into good, and using it as a vessel for joy. And so I
Yeah,
think that's powerful.
absolutely. Well, thank you. I really
Absolutely.
enjoy it.
It comes across. And
Okay,
I know
good,
it's
good.
can be really difficult to summarize all those thoughts and feelings and then feeling vulnerable to share them out with people in the public. But if you have the opportunity to do that more, I think would encourage a lot of people.
I'm working on it. I think the more I tell people, the more, it's easier for me to convey
Yeah,
what was happening at the time.
for sure.
Yeah,
Sometimes it takes processing through it a few times before you understand what you're trying to say.
very true.
On that note, and we can move on from this shortly, but do you find that like the conceptual side of how you think about your work, does that come like in the process while you're doing it, or is it more like you synthesize, oh, that's what I was doing, or that's what was happening to me, like after you look at a piece for a while?
I love that you asked that because I actually was in a discussion with another artist about this several years ago. And she actually said, the more you go to therapy, the more that while you're making the work, you'll realize why you're making it. And you know what? I have to say she was entirely true. I
Mm,
think, that post-college era, I don't know that at the time I was aware of what the pieces were doing for me, but yeah, I am more cognizant now of why I'm making what I make, and I think it's interesting because my move towards porcelain is now driven because I've seen this move in myself, and
mm.
I want to convey that in clay. So now I'm able to look at it and say, I'm going into it with this intention of making. I'm aware of it even before I've started the process. And that's different. That's very different for me, but I'm very excited about it.
I think that's cool too. And I think it expresses a level of maturity and awareness that you have with yourself and your work. Because there's a lot of times we'll create reactively or we'll look back and say, yeah, that is what I was doing. And being able to look into a period that you're working your way into and come to it with intent, I think is, yeah, just like I don't have anything other than to say it's a mile marker, I would say, to check your awareness level since you're like, oh, I'm moving forward with intention. I think that's a good path for artists to be on.
Yeah, I'll let you know how the work goes. This will be my first
Nice.
time really creating a series purely knowing why I'm doing it. So we'll see.
I'm excited to see it.
Me too.
Okay. So, leaving the conceptual realm and moving into the education realm, you are an educator.
Mhm.
And a lot of creators and educators probably, from my perspective, look to you for inspiration or information and how they set up their classrooms or how they can better teach themselves. And so I know, or I hope a lot of them will listen to this. And so I've got a few questions geared towards helping educate better.
Perfect.
How do you structure your lessons to keep students engaged with the creative process as well as the technical challenges behind pottery or clay?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends a lot on the age group that you're working in. Certainly, you cater everything depending on who your audience is, right? So
Mm,
I would say I treat my, seventh, I teach 7 through 12, which is a crazy age range, but I would treat my seventh graders in a very different way for their first clay class than I would one of my high schoolers. And then I would teach all of them very differently than I do my seniors that are advanced that have taken all of the classes. But in general, what I've learned is I think it works best with clay specifically when I give them kind of the base knowledge, right? We give them like the technical, what needs to happen, how to roll a coil, how to score, those kinds of things.
yeah.
And I give them as much creative freedom as I can. I always try to make my lessons a little more on the open-ended side. I think when I started teaching, I was much more like, I'm going to do ABC and you should do ABC. And I realized, no, there's beautiful things can happen if I let them go A, B, Z, wherever they want to jump around. So I've tried to really change my teaching philosophy from I'm not trying to demonstrate exactly what to do. I'm trying to give them those root skills
Hmm.
and then helping them walk through the creative process of taking those fundamentals and building them into something new that is more reflective of who they are and their interests.
I like that. I think that's a good place for an art teacher to approach from because then you're leaving open ended results rather than funneling into this is a project.
Yes, it has made grading challenging.
I imagine. Is that where the subjective, but it's art comes in?
A little bit. I think I my rubrics have changed over the years. I've gotten a lot better at writing them now. I definitely have a couple core things that are easy to grade on, like we have size parameters, for example,
Okay.
because everything has to fit in a kiln, so that's an easy one
Mhm.
to grade on. And then really what I've shifted to more of when it comes to like the conceptual side is just really, can you tell me why you're doing what you're doing? Can you show me that decision making process? And that way you're not grading on necessarily what the finished product is, but more of, are they starting to think in that way? Are they starting to get more creative with things? So I've changed the rubrics a lot over the years.
I can imagine. I don't
Yeah.
know where I would begin in assigning a grade to a clay project. I have to
If
think
I
about
could
this more.
never grade, I would. If that was an option, but it's not, unfortunately for me.
You kind of have to.
Yeah, yeah, you do.
Some letters got to be on a card at the end of the. Is it 9 weeks or semester? How do you guys break it up?
We're actually a trimester system. Add some spiciness there. So we've got 12-week classes,
Okay,
and we'll have three of them, throughout the year. So
cool.
yeah,
Well, you're gearing up to start school next week.
correct. Well, we had faculty was back today, but students not till next Friday.
Okay. Yeah, they always make the faculty go back sooner.
They do. We have to
Yeah.
learn. We have to have meetings. Who knows?
Professional development.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Well, what are you prepping for your classroom? What do you think other pottery teachers should have lined up for their classroom ahead of when class starts? What are the essentials?
That's a good question. I would say one of the most essential things you should do if you are starting off your year as a teacher is get some ideas of what your cleaning procedures will look like. That sounds silly and it sounds
Oh, yeah.
non-ceramics, but it is an entirely critical part that has taken me a long time to really perfect. So that is one of the biggest things, truly. Go into it, plan some cleaning procedures, because that will save you so much time later on. So that's kind of the biggest, my like real number one. I'm like, if you're brand new to this, make sure you do that. And then, of course, there's things we have to prepare, like our syllabi and our lesson plans and those kinds of things. I've been busy this week stocking up on all of my materials for everything. I know we pushed this podcast a little bit later because I suddenly had 2,000 pounds of clay arrive. So making sure that all those things are in order. And then really my next big task for myself with my classroom is to go through my rosters and figure out who all I'm teaching and start to get all of those things laid out. So, which is exciting to me. I always love going through the roster.
Oh, yeah. Jumping back just a little bit, I'm particularly interested in the cleaning procedures.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about what your cleaning procedures are from your 8 years teaching experience?
Yep. Absolutely. I would say it depends on your class. If you're wheel throwing, that is your number one that you do need to have a solid cleaning routine in for. So my classes are around 55 minutes long. And so that is from the minute that they arrive to me to the minute they have to walk out and sprint to the next class.
That's really
So
quick.
wheel throwing in that time period is difficult.
Yeah.
So I always make sure what I converted over to this year that's been helpful is every student has their own bucket that has their name on
Hmm.
it, and they have their set of tools within that bucket. So they at least take some ownership over those because they are on their shelf. It is theirs. And I've noticed that's helped them make sure that we're cleaning tools better because they do feel like, well, these are my tools.
Hmm.
So I've shifted over to that, which is really nice. And then I always make sure at the wheel that day one, am showing them, okay, so we throw whatever it is we're throwing. Then we take our sponge. We're going to clean out the splash pan real quick. We're going to clean out, I've got some kick wheels. So some of them don't have a splash pan on the front. So you have this big
Hmm.
metal tray. And I show them, we can take the big sponges, clean that off. And I really try to teach them to kind of clean throughout the entire class period. Because what I've learned is if you wait until the very end, it is a nightmare. So we don't do that. We clean as we go, and that's been very important. And then for my hand builders, they're a little bit easier. They usually don't make quite as much a mess, usually, as my wheel throwing kids. But for my hand builders, I have broken them up into tables and I give them, your mission is to totally clean the table. You guys can break it out however you want. So there are some groups that will decide to do like a group leader who will be cleaning for a week and then they rotate to a new group leader or that kind of
Hmm.
thing. But I found that actually for high schoolers specifically, and my middle schoolers do a pretty good job with that too. They like that I'm not saying everybody has to clean their own spot. They like that they have a choice on, okay, are we going to have one person do it? Do we want two people to do it? How do we want to clean it up? And for some reason that does help. I don't know why, and I'm not sure, but it's been a good method that seems to work for me. So letting them kind of make some decisions there.
Okay. I'm definitely going to steal some of these as we open up community studio.
Please do.
Sorry. Some of these questions might be selfishly oriented, as you might soon guess.
Oh, I'm here for it. Let me help.
Okay. I'll definitely ask some more. What are some key tools that you must have in your studio, whether you're making or teaching?
Are we talking physical tools?
No.
Oh, okay. That makes it a harder question. Hold
Well, I
on.
mean, like, yes, either yes and.
Yes, and okay, okay. Because obviously I think my physical tool list is maybe too long for this podcast. So I like a lot of tools. Now that I say that, I would would say one of the best tools you can bring to the classroom is an understanding that you may not make it from point A to point B in one class session. I
Hmm.
think when I went into teaching, I was a little disillusional that I could, delusional, that was the right word, a little delusional that I could really control everything that would happen throughout the class period. And that is entirely not true.
Hmm.
So what I do now is when I structure lessons, I do put a point A to a point B, but that span is usually over a week or something like that. And I really allow myself to have more freedom within my own schedule with my students to make sure that I can really make the time as meaningful as it needs to be for them. It's less about me getting from one point to another. It's more about helping them take the time that they need to get from that point to the next. So I would say a flexibility, not lack of planning, because it is still very planned, but
Hmm.
an openness to taking a side road when needed is one of the best tools you can bring into your own classroom.
I love that because then you're not compressing everything, feeling rushed, feeling like you have to
Yes,
accomplish something. Students probably pick up on that.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would like to think they do.
Or like conversely, if you are trying to get to point B at the end of the class period, I'm sure the pressure mounts for the learning and diminishes how much creativity output you have or how much you're able to actually process through what you're trying to learn.
Yes, and I've had some teachers tell me that, well, if you don't have a point A to point B for every single day, then they're just going to procrastinate and they're not going
Hmm.
to get their things done. But I guess my counterpoint to that is ceramics will always teach you lessons that I could not do. Ceramics does not do procrastination well. I think anyone who does ceramics knows that. So I
Hmm.
find that this approach to teaching for my medium really works quite well because you're right, they could procrastinate, but usually they'll only do it once because ceramics will show them that this is not a class you can procrastinate in.
They'll come back and it's bone dry and everything's cracked and can't
Mhm.
work with it anymore.
Oh,
Hmm.
yes, yes. Yeah.
How do you help students gain confidence in new processes? Like, I imagine somebody coming into a clay class for the first time feeling very overwhelmed. How do you break that overwhelm down into bite sized little bits that they can work through?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that helps take down that level of stress that you can bring into a new experience, which ceramics is a new experience for many of my students, is I always try to start with what my expectations of them are. So I will always say, I do not care if you can leave my class knowing how to make a really good pot. And that sounds weird because I am teaching ceramics. But what I say is, I hope you leave and you learned some new skills. You learned a new understanding for art. That's a huge one for me. If they leave and they never touch clay again, obviously, I wish that they would. I think it's good for us. But
Hmm.
if they leave and all they've taken with them is an appreciation for something, I'm 100% happy with that. I think that they have done exactly what they needed to do. And I think telling my students that ahead of time at the start of my classes helps them understand what I'm there for, right? I'm not just there to teach them a skill. Certainly, like I said, I hope they leave and I hope they can make a piece, and they all do. Everyone leaves and can make something pretty good, you know? But I think what it shows them is that I care about them beyond what they can physically build me in my classroom, right? What I
Hmm.
care is about investing in them as a person. And I think that can really help them feel more comfortable in a new space, trying something new that they're not comfortable with. And it's a good kind of, I almost want to call it an icebreaker, but
Hmm. Love it. Thanks for sharing.
thanks. I
I
hope
know,
that made sense.
yeah, I think it did. It did for me. And I'll go back and listen to this again so
Amazing.
I can learn some more. I know that teaching is such an outpouring of effort and energy and time. My wife's a teacher. A lot of my families are teachers or in the education system. And so I see how challenging sometimes it is. What is the, if we're talking things in like a vessel related, you're pouring out. How are you being poured back into when it comes to teaching? What are brings you back to it? What are you getting from this?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that brings you back to teaching time and time again is the students. But I'll dive deeper into that because I'm sure a lot of teachers would answer that the same way.
Yeah.
But there is just something so deeply fulfilling about having a student that leaves my class feeling like they not only learned something in clay, right? That's obviously still my overarching thing, right? I'm teaching them ceramics, but watching them grow, watching them try something uncomfortable, watching them do something that was a little bit awkward and then ended up working. And, I get to watch a lot of my students have the aha moment where
Hmm.
coils weren't rolling the way that they need to, and then suddenly they do. And it's watching them go through all of those little victories that is amazing. We have so many little victories a day. It's beautiful. And then the more that you bond with your kids, the more that you see them, the older they get, you get to be there for the big victories too. And those are obviously really fulfilling. I love writing college recs and getting to reflect on my time with my students and decision day where they tell me where they're going and all those kinds of things. The students give you so much back. Yes, I
Hmm.
give a lot to the field. Yes, I give a lot to what I do, but they will never stop filling me back up with just sharing their lives with me. I feel very fortunate to get to watch them go through so many different small victories.
Well, that's really cool. And I've being so close to my wife, who's been a teacher for so long, I think she would say the same thing. And even just from the outside, adjacent to so many educators, I think what you said really resonates kind of across the board because yeah, you're not just pouring out, you're investing in, and then you get to see them grow up and turn into people and go out and do. We have one of Lindsay's former students. He was almost like her protege. She directs plays, and he was her stage manager. He's come in and worked every summer with us. And I know just from hearing her side of the story, being able to see him grow and develop and then like come in a professional capacity and start doing work has been incredibly enriching.
Yeah, I
You're right.
think my story, I think your wife's story, I think that's what keeps most educators in the field. I think if it weren't for those kinds of relationships with our students, it would be a totally different job.
It would just be a gauntlet.
Yes. And I don't need that.
No, no. Okay. On the topic of teaching, is there anything more that you would like to state or talk about or answer that we haven't talked about already?
Mm. Well, one of the questions I get asked a lot is about the balance of teaching and making work. I don't
Yeah,
know if that's something that you would want to talk about, but it is
I
certainly
do.
people ask me about it a lot.
So I mean, we've talked about behind the scenes a little bit where I'm moving into this new path of starting a community studio where teaching is at the forefront. And I'm trying to go through the operational jumps of making production and making a little bit take a backseat, but also still function and be an income driver. So I am very interested in the balance of work, making and teaching. So I would love if you could take a little deeper.
I think it's something that I would say I have not always had balance. And
Hmm.
there are certainly times in the year even where I feel like I am heavily into one side and neglecting the other in some way. Um, I think that the biggest advice that I give to people is, set realistic expectations for yourself. I think a lot of us go into it feeling like, if I'm spending this much time teaching, then I need to spend this much time making. And the reality
Hmm.
is you could do that, but then there's no time to sleep, right?
Yeah.
You can't fill the hours that way. So I think what I try to remind people of is like I said, there are ebbs and flows. There are some seasons where I feel like I am more in one than I am the other. And I think that's normal. I think with most of the educators and artists that I've spoken with who do both of those jobs, we certainly feel that. And I think I've always tried to reserve time for myself to make some work because I also am aware that when I'm still making, it makes me a better teacher. When I'm still practicing my craft, it makes me a better teacher. So you can even view it as putting in your professional development if you feel like you need to, really deeply tie it to school in some way. So every time you're making, you are really working on your professional development for your classroom, right? And it's just so important to not neglect that. I think it's so important to make time for it. Maybe that time looks like 1 hour a week sometimes. Maybe that time looks like 1 hour a day if you can do that some weeks, and just giving yourself space to realize that it's okay to not keep the same schedule, to not keep the same amount of production every single week, every
Hmm.
season of your year. Um, and to have more grace there, I feel like is the number one thing I try to tell people.
How do you I mean, you mentioned having grace with yourself, but how do you have external pressures of other people giving you grace, whether it's your collectors who are hoping for a drop or admin who's hoping for better performance or better results? How do you handle that side of grace?
Yeah, it's tricky. I would love to say I've totally nailed it, but I have not. I would say I'm probably the biggest critic of myself. I'm very fortunate to have an administrative team that has never said to me anything like, you need to be doing more in your classroom. So I'm
Hmm.
very fortunate. I feel like maybe I've at least done that part really well. But certainly when it comes to making, I have people that are like, oh, you haven't done a drop this month. What's going on? And maybe I know that it was finals that month and I was just booked and busy trying to make sure that all my kids' work was fired on time. So I think if you look at it as trying to please everyone all the time, it's just not going to happen. There's just no way. I think it is so important to make sure that you are pleasing yourself and
Hmm.
making sure that you feel comfortable with what you've done for that month or that whatever time period we're talking about. I know for myself, for that finals example, I will be aware that, I did what I needed to do for my students, and that's who I need to fulfill right now, and I did that. And so I love my collectors, but unfortunately, I won't be able to fill every cup during that month.
Well, and I guess from the making perspective and being in charge of your cadence is kind of nice. I think that's what draws a lot of potters, especially with, I know me personally, having a tendency to want more control over my output. And so I'm kind of running my own business. It's sometimes difficult to remember that I set the pace.
Yes. And I have definitely been through phases where I put too many demands, where I was doing things like needing to fulfill a store, for example.
Yeah.
And that's a certain level of responsibility, right? That's not the same as a collector who was hoping for a drop. This is someone who is depending on you to bring pieces. So those kinds of places are a little bit more difficult. That is one where I'm like, yeah, you do have to kind of make the time and get the job done. I don't know. It's a balancing act, and I've definitely done things where I've taken on way too many of those, and then times where I'm like, "Oh, I guess maybe I could add a couple back." So it swings, it's a pendulum.
That's life.
That is life.
Now, if we could talk just for a brief second, just kind of recap the Fire and Flux workshop for you, because personally, I'm interested if having that experience is something that influences like future work for you, like these community participation workshops, like either Fire and Flux, like we did with Clay King, or NSECA. How do those like moments where you get to really engage with the professional pottery community? How does that influence what you do day to day?
Oh, I love doing in-person events with other potters. Whether I am making work, whether I am watching someone else make work, whether I am just hearing about hypothetically someone making work, I think I get so much back from potter to potter interactions. I
Hmm.
would say, for example, the Fire and Flex workshop. Of course, I was excited to one, do my little demos and spiels and all that jazz, and I love that. And I was also excited to learn about glazes, and I was also excited to fire the soda kiln. But I have to say, one of the things I was most excited about was that time when the kiln is running and you just get to chat with everyone. And it's just like hanging out with old friends, even though I don't know most of them. We became fast friends. But it's that time when you get to sit and just talk with other people who share the same passion as you.
Hmm.
And that, regardless of what the work looks like, will always make me want to get back to the studio and make more things. It's just something about connecting with that community that is so incredible. And Sika, I talk about it all the time on social media. I think everyone should go to NSECA if you can. That is a large conference for anyone listening that doesn't know what NSECA is. It's a very large ceramics conference where you will just see more ceramics than you ever possibly thought you could. You will see more tools than you ever possibly thought you could. You will attend more lectures than you ever thought you possibly could. And you will also meet more potters than you ever thought you possibly could. But it is a yearly event that always makes me want to get back to my classroom and make more things and try new things and experiment. And I in person is always, I love it so much.
I'm right there with you. I think NSECA is like sipping from a fire hydrant. There's just it really is so much. I think every year I go and I get overwhelmed and then I come back and I'm inspired and I'm like, oh, let's do it again.
Yes, 100%. That is the best analogy I've heard to describe it because I think you can even hear that and be like, sure, if you've never gone to Antigua, you can hear that analogy and think, sure, okay. But once you go, yes, it is entirely like sipping from a fire hydrant.
Hmm. Is there anything from the soda workshop at Clay King that you learned that was unexpected? that you took away that you didn't think you would?
I think one of the things that was really exciting for me to see was the way that you guys run your soda kiln because it's different than the other soda kilns that I've run. I know that we had talked a little bit how everyone adds soda in different ways and all that
Oh
kind
yeah.
of stuff. And I really loved just the reminder to myself that we may all have the same tools, but everyone still does things differently. And I think it's good encouragement for me as well to continue to see how other people do things and to continue to put myself in situations where things are being done in a different way. I just feel like I learned so much from you guys and watching how you do things. And it just adds more tools to my tool bucket for me whenever I do future endeavors.
Hmm. Now, before you came, I didn't know that you had run soda kilns so often through your college life. So, what was different between how you ran them versus how like Mike would take over the kiln?
Well, I'll preface it with this. So, we in college, I was there whenever the soda kiln was being built. So, I got to help with that. And I got to be one of the people that really helped kind of refine the kiln. So, what I think was funny and what I think I enjoyed the most is my previous soda experience through Kennesaw State University. I was keeping like copious notes on things. I was documenting everything because I needed to do all this research so I could have
Yep.
this binder and I could show my professor, now business partner Jeff Campana, here's how this worked, here's what the results were, here's what I think this happened for. And so I had the best time because you guys just knew what you were doing, whereas I was kind of discovering what I was doing and trying to figure out why did this happen the way that it happened. So that was one of my favorite differences is working with a team where you guys are very familiar with your kiln. You don't need a giant stack of binders to tell you, what to do. Whereas with my experience, I do feel like I spent a lot of time studying and trying to minutely change things.
So, I think that particular, I knew where you were going with this. And I started laughing, not because I think that's ridiculous, but because I am very much that way. When we first built that kiln, I had a log and I tracked and I wrote down and recorded everything. But I stopped doing that mostly because the force of will that is my command and his sporadic, I'm just going to do it approach to the way he does pottery, I just couldn't keep up with that anymore. And it always works. It always works. He has
I
some
mean, yeah.
I don't like kiln whispering that happens with him there. I'm just gonna, it's in reduction. Let's throw some wood in.
That's what I'm saying. It's so good for me though to see someone else who handles it differently because it's a good reminder to myself that maybe I don't always need to approach things the way that I typically do.
I think at first interacting with him, and we co-fired that kiln a lot in the beginning, was surrender is a good word to his process and overcoming the anxiety that comes from not having a plan or a log to follow. But it's worked out, and all the pots turn out beautiful.
It has. And I always felt like he was confident with whatever he was
Yeah.
doing. He's like, yeah, this is the time. This is how we're going to do this.
Mhm.
And so that was nice for me because when I was solo firing, I would not say confidence is the word I would use to describe my approach to the kill. So it was really refreshing to be with someone who's like, no, this is what it needs. This is what we're going to do. And just do it. And it worked. It worked great.
Yeah. Yeah. He definitely has a process. And I was very enthused to see how all the pots came out. I think they turned out really beautifully. There were very few that I thought that one's a loss. I think one got stuck in the chimney, like it fell over and glued itself to some bricks. That's probably the only like outright loss. But even the glazes on that pot were very nice.
Oh, I'm sure those glazes were probably really awesome.
They were. They were just
Just maybe not the most functional piece anymore.
no. It's now forever part of the chimney.
Oh, I love that. It's very cute.
Now we're about an hour in, so I just want to check in with you. How are you feeling on time? And if you have to go, we can tighten things up. Or if you still feel good, we can keep going.
I'm still feeling good. Up to you on your show. So whatever you would like me time wise, if you want us to wrap things up, we can do that. But I am happy camper. So
Okay, good. I've got a few more for you. And again,
cool.
I'm in no rush.
Awesome.
So I'd love to transition into kind of your social front, your content life, because I'm sure a lot of people here, myself included, even though I was able to attend your social media workshop, have a lot of questions about how you approach social media and how you view it as an opportunity vehicle to not only teach and inspire other people, but again, this kind of give and take, how it also gives to you. I know there's not a question baked into that, it's more of a segue, but does the way you share your pottery techniques online influence the way you teach in person?
Ooh, I don't know that I've ever thought of it in that direction. I think I've thought of the inverse over what I do in the classroom and how that impacts how I approach online. But actually, I'm glad that you said it because that probably is true. I think the whole reason I started doing social media really, I had an Instagram account for a while. I think I started it in college, just posting photos of my work. But during the pandemic, my school went virtual, and so I really got good at condensing my material because what I learned is through the virtual setting, my students just didn't have the same attention span that we had in the classroom, which makes total sense. I understand that. So I got really good at condensing material, and then that's kind of what led to me posting some things online with Instagram because I felt like it was really fun and I didn't mind recording actually. It played into
Hmm.
my photography background really well, and so I had a good time with that. So all that to say, it's I don't know, they go back and forth a lot. I would say sometimes I learn things, like, I post really short videos, and it reminds me, like, "Okay, when you're teaching this in person, what are the key 3 things you need to actually cover?" And it's a good reminder for me of, like, centering, breaking it down into 60-second segments, which is what I do online. I do that now more in person because I think it's kinda the same, like, the faster I can give them the bigger picture,
Hmm.
easier it is. Gosh, I don't know how to phrase that in a nice way with a bow. I hope you understand where I'm going with it,
I think I get
though.
where you're going. Yeah, the
Okay,
faster way
good,
you
good.
can explain the picture, the quicker you can get into the details and do it.
Yes, that's a much more eloquent way of saying what I was trying to say.
I got it. I
Yes.
imagine I know the way I approach social media and how it has an effect on me is oftentimes I feel not swayed by it or like I have to chase response or engagement. But I can definitely tell that having people in my comment section saying, I really enjoy this or I really don't enjoy this definitely has an impact on me as I create or do in the real life, so to speak. And so I was interested how that played out for you too.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say social media has given me so much back, a lot of it extremely positive. I would say some of the relationships that I've created through social media, I don't know that I ever would have had without it. I'm hesitant to
Mm,
say ever because I'm like, people always find their way to each other in some way. But
yeah.
I have a lot of friendships that I would say really, I don't know, really bloomed because of social media. Sorry if there's a dog paw that just came into Hold on.
Oh, hello.
I'm so sorry.
No, not at all.
Okay.
I had to boot mine out or she'd be right here too.
Yeah, he clearly okay, that's fine.
Well, now you have to
We'll
introduce him.
just
So this is Baloo.
okay. All right. This is Baloo. He is our beagle. Well, some kind of beagle mix. We don't know. We got him from the Humane Society. Very relaxed though. He loves being on camera, clearly.
He's a natural.
He's a natural.
Every
He's
side's a
born to
good
be a
side.
celebrity. Yeah. Okay. I'm so sorry. Where were we?
Don't apologize. Dogs are always a joy and a pleasure. No
I
apology
think you're
needed.
right. That's fair. That's good.
Yeah, he adds, definitely doesn't detract.
Okay. Fabulous.
Can you share any insights that you've observed that's made your content successful? And if somebody wanted advice on how they could mimic that success, what would you tell them?
I think it's tricky because what I've learned is success is such a broad term. We all have different understandings of what success actually means. I would say that we all have different definitions of what success looks like. So it's hard to say, how could they gain my success? Because their view of what my success is may be different than what my view of my success is. You know what I mean? But I would say one of my biggest pieces of advice to people when it comes to approaching social media is to figure out right away kind of what your goal is. Um, and really work on figuring out what your own definition of success is, and then you can start to look at people that you feel have achieved it and start to break down how you think they've done it. Sometimes you can ask, I don't know, sometimes people respond, sometimes they don't. But for me, for example, one of my pillars of being successful felt like whenever I had a really solid community of people that I could reach out to and talk with. And I think part of the way I did that was through sharing frequently, right? I shared a
Hmm.
lot about the things I'm really passionate about. And so I think that helped me really draw in other people that are like me that are also really passionate about the same field and build that community together where now I have a bunch of people I can go to and geek out for a lack of better of phrasing, you know? So yeah, that's hopefully good advice.
Oh, I think it is because you really do have to set your own definition of what success looks like, and it's not always what that means to somebody else. Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, that is what social media is built for, is shaping community and building and nurturing people on the other side of the screen who are just real people.
Absolutely. And then I think there's byproducts of that, you know. You can sell your work from that. You can work with other brands from that. You can do those other things, you know. But forming connections feels like a big part of social media for me. And if I weren't forming those connections, I don't know that I'd want to do it anymore.
Yeah. I know we're past probably a lot of the stigma of being a social media creator or having that be like thought of as a less than part of somebody's life and how they want to put out into the world. But for somebody who is still kind of thinking, it's not for me, or I don't see the value in that, what would you say to that person who might be on the fence of maybe I want to try that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I would say try it. I think if you look at it, and I know I've heard from people where they're like, that's not a real job or whatever. I'm like, well, that's fine. People said I couldn't make a living doing ceramics, and now, you know, here I am doing all these other things. So there will always be people that think that your creative field specifically is not worth the endeavor. But I would argue that if you talk to anyone who has gone all in, I mean, most people are really happy with that decision for a reason, you know?
Mhm.
Those of us that have plunged into our creative outlet, whatever that may look like, maybe that's doing social media things, maybe that's being a potter, a painter, a, you know, whatever. Um, I think connect with those people, right? And see why they're so driven, see what's worked for them, learn from them, ask them as many questions as you can. But also go into it understanding that just like ceramics, you probably aren't going to get it day one, right? Just like
Mm.
anything, really. It's going to take work, it's going to take time, it's going to take putting out some content where you probably look back and go, that wasn't that great. You know, I certainly look back at some of my old videos and I'm like, wow, that's a way to produce that. Okay. It's a little cringy, but I'm glad that it's still up because it's a good reminder to me of where I've come from, right? If I didn't make that content, then I wouldn't have learned the skill to make the next thing and whatnot. So that would be my other advice is go into it knowing that you're going to be a little awkward sometimes, right? And the more you do it, the more comfortable you can feel. But you'll never know if you don't try it.
That's true. I mean, those first couple videos that I've put out, I think anybody puts out are almost always cringe or awkward. But
Yes.
yeah, you're right. At the end of the day, it is a tool. Do you have any like wild opportunities or crazy stories that would never have happened if you had not posted on social media that you can share?
Can I say working for Clay King? I feel like when I started posting, it was truly because I feel like I had so much teaching that I wanted to do and I just needed to throw it all somewhere. And that's really why I started posting the tutorials that I do. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would get to actually work for companies and produce educational content for them. I really did not know that that could happen. I didn't know that it was a thing as well, you know. Um, so I credit social media with that, allowing me to share who I am online in a way that then attracted some really amazing businesses. I think I feel very fortunate to work with all the people that I've worked with. I have obviously loved my relationship with Clay King, and working with you guys every single month is so fun. And you know, I work with Garrity Tools, and I loved learning about who they are as a company and what they stand for, and Diamond Core Tools and Sandbow Studios and Sula. I'm like looking around my
Hmm.
house to like find the objects because I keep things from everyone, you know. But Gip and Grip, like I could keep going. I just there are so many cool, amazing companies that I don't think would know who I am if I didn't make those couple awkward videos and start just really running with it.
Yeah, and likewise, I mean, from the Clay King perspective, we've enjoyed really working with you. And I think going back to it, I don't know if anybody knew that that was the direction that social media would take. And so we're kind of like shaping it because even in the ceramics world, I don't think creator partnerships with brands or companies was very prevalent before 2020, maybe a little bit. Like I will say like there's a few brands that have always supported artists, and a Speedball and Amico, I know from just personal observation, have always had artists be a part of their marketing opportunities or creative networks or professional networks. But on a regular basis, we're really shaping community and like using that as a vehicle for marketing or outbound sales or community building. I think that's still relatively new in the grand scope of things.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think I could see it. I think it happened a while ago in other fields. Like
Mm,
I know during my Clay King talk, I referenced how I was inspired by a couple beauty YouTubers. That was
yeah.
really people that I loved watching their content. And they were doing those kinds of sponsored type videos.
Mm,
I remember back in like 2010, like that kind of era to me is like peak YouTube.
yep.
So I think we saw it in other fields, but I do think you're right. I don't think it really came to ceramics until maybe 2020 feels right to me.
Ceramics as an industry feels a lot like the process, and that's a little slow and late to adapt and try new things.
Yes, I would agree with that. But I think in a way it's kind of nice because I think we can learn from the other fields
Yeah.
and
The first
take.
movers and the tech fields and all those people who are right after it, we can,
Yep.
it's like, hey, pave the way and we'll be there. And then when we get there, I've got a kiln
We
cooling
will we
down.
will roll our clay down there. We will get
Yep.
there eventually. Yep.
Is there anybody who you've had a conversation with through social media that you would never have had a conversation with? Celebrity, famous person, or just a personal hero?
Oh, okay. Oh, this is a good one. Hold on, give me a minute.
Okay.
There's been like a couple moments where I'm like, "What do you mean this person saw my video?" Like, what like, they'll like something and it goes to, like,
Yeah.
the top of your thing, and you're just like, "Whoa, hold on." But I have to say, I think the one that I thought was the coolest, that my high schoolers also think was the coolest, is Seth Rogen.
I'm just laughing at the Venn diagram that is ceramics and Seth Rogen and social media.
Yes. That was one that I don't I don't know. I never would have thought that I would have connected with him in any way, and then he
Yeah.
followed me one day, and I was like,
What?
"What?" And then I remember shortly after that, I was doing a non-Potter husband video, and he liked it, and I was like, "Seth Rogen has seen my husband throw on the wheel. What is this world? Like, what is happening right now?" I've never sent him a message because I know that if I did, because he follows me, I think it would go to, like, his actual inbox, which
Yeah.
probably as a celebrity, he probably doesn't even monitor it anyway, I would
Might be
assume.
surprised.
But I'm, like, too scared. I'm like, "I don't even know what I would say." But yeah.
So similarly, I think we share some experience here. He followed Clay King, it's been a few years now, and bought his VL Whisper through Instagram DMs.
No
So
way.
I got to help him order his pottery wheel, ship it out. That was fun.
That
Because
is
I
so
remember
cool.
as a 15-year-old kid watching Pineapple Express and Freaks and Geeks, I was like, this guy's hilarious. He was such a part of my hood rat media enjoying movie loving upbringing. And now it's also like this weird tangential part of ceramics too that is still there.
Yeah, I have loved, watching what he's done for ceramics. I feel
Yeah,
like there are some people that I'm sure will say negative things, but honestly, I feel like he did a great job of spotlighting pottery and making it more mainstream, and I think that was awesome. So I have nothing but nice things to say about what he's done for the ceramics community. I think it's really cool.
I did love how he would take real workshops from potters and jump on social media and take pictures with them and share their stuff. So it was, yeah, I would agree. I wonder what if we could measure the cultural impact of Seth Rogen in ceramics, what that would be.
That'd be a fascinating study. I don't know how you would
Hmm.
conduct it, but I wanna know.
I have no idea either. But if somebody listening here knows how to do social surveys and wants to do that measurement, there are two interested people right here who would read your case study.
Yep, at least 3. We're gonna add my husband because I know he would be excited.
There we go. At least three.
At least 3.
So speaking with and kind of touching on the brand partnerships, you've worked with Clay King for a while at this point and had all these other brand partnerships. How have those relationships developed for you over time? Does that have any significant impact in what you do day to day or month to month or how you create?
I would say my brand partnerships have definitely helped create social media. Well, not create social media, but turn social media into a business for me. I have certainly debated, do I want to stay in the classroom? Do I want to continue doing more of this online thing? Because you do reach a point when it's hard to do both full
Mm,
time. So that's definitely been something that I've toyed with, and it depends on the year. I think I go back and forth like many people do with their careers. But it certainly has helped me make social media into an actual business, which has been very exciting for me and very fun. And there's been a lot of opportunities that have only happened because I've grown the relationships with the brands. I think probably the first big thing for me was with Garrity Tools whenever I got to do design a rib with them.
that's
That
cool.
for me was something that I never could have imagined doing. And it's kind of funny because when I started working with them, I had said out loud to my husband, if I ever get to design a rib, I want that to be my first tattoo, thinking that it would never happen, right? I was like, no brand is ever going to let me, craft something that's a tool for them. Like I really didn't think that was possible. And then the dirt noodle rib came about, and so I have yet to get a tattoo, but I have said that would be my first. So it needs to be, I guess. But anyway, so that partnership only really happened because I had been reviewing ribs for them, I think at that point for maybe a year and a half or 2 years. And I think I rarely ask for things. I have a hard time asking people for things. But I
Yeah.
was like, you know what? I should really just toss it out there. It was like the start of a new year. And I was like, we're just going to be confident and we're going to say, hey, if you guys ever want to collab on a rib together, let me know. I would love to do it. And then to my disbelief, they said, absolutely. And I ended up getting we created 2 ribs and then we did production with one of them. But that whole process, I learned so much, and that only happened because I had built the relationship with them for a couple years and done that.
Cool. And I think that is a testament to just asking,
Yep.
being able to just ask for what you want to happen in the world.
It was terrifying because I knew they could say no, but I figured if they said no, I would probably still get to do their tool of the month ribs and demo all those and whatnot. So I was like, well, they say no, it's okay, and then we'll be fine. I just really didn't think they'd say yes.
When you said social media has turned into a business for you, is it at the point where you have these two incomes and teaching and social media are here? Is there ever a point at which teaching for social media becomes the route that you would lean towards or go towards? Or will there always be this balancing act of trying to do both?
I have thought a lot about that, and I still do think a lot about it. I think, there are times when I've felt like maybe I do just want to dive into the social media and lean into it because, I do, for the most part, have a pretty stable income from social media,
Hmm.
which is something that I feel very fortunate in doing. I have several people that I work with on a routine basis now that I produce content for. So it is more of a income. I would say if I were on TikTok doing something like the Creator Fund, I would be much more hesitant
Yeah.
because that is something where it's really kind of hit or miss, I want to say, for the most part, and based on your views and that kind of thing. Whereas this is more of like, it's not necessarily views based. These are more long-standing contracts that I have. So in that way, I had thought about it because it is more stable in some ways than social media in other ways. I don't know if that's making sense, but I really have to say though, I just love teaching. And so I
Hmm.
think that's been the biggest thing that's kept me in both worlds is because I just love being in my classroom so much. There is something about teaching in person, and like I have to say I love my middle schoolers. I know some people are like, "Oh, I would just want to do the high school," and I do high school and middle school. And don't get me wrong, I love my high schoolers as well. But like there is something about the joy that those 7th graders bring into school on the first day that, gosh, I just get hooked. So in that way, I don't know that I could ever leave teaching because I love what I get to do in my classroom so much.
And if you love it, you don't have to justify any other answer than that.
That is true. That took me a while to realize that as well. Yeah.
Although I've heard it takes a very special person to enjoy teaching middle school classes.
I would say I'm probably a special person.
I'd say that
I'm
too.
not scared of glitter. I'm not scared of any of those things.
Mm, so, last question here that I have, and then we'll open it up once again to see if you have anything more you'd like to add. Is In your tenure of reviewing tools for all of the people and the places and the things, has there been a favorite one that you didn't think you'd like that you've grown to love?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I have a tool. So I review a lot of tools. I would say at this point, I have reviewed thousands of tools. I think we can
Yeah,
safely say that.
probably.
And I do go into all of them being very, I would say, cautiously optimistic. Certainly, the more I've gotten, I've kind of refined my taste for tools. But one of the things that we use every single day that I didn't think was as important as it is a wire tool.
Hmm,
I think wire tools are a not talked about often enough tool
I would agree.
because I really I started to use the Dirty Girls Tools Ergo thin wire tool with the little orange handles. Yeah, jot it down. Do you have one in
Oh
person?
yeah, I've got like four. I can grab it right
I
now.
love them. I love them. I
They're
don't
great.
think I realized that having a tool like that, essentially the big reason to push for that tool is that it has a very thin wire. It is
Uh-huh.
much thinner than pretty much any of the other wire tools that I've ever seen on the market, while also still being a very dependable, reliable, comfortable to hold wire tool. That's also key. So I didn't know that your wire tool could make such a big impact on what you're doing, but the ability to wire off your work and not remove massive chunks of clay is insane.
Preach.
I brought one to Diamond, or not to Diamond Core, sorry. I brought one to Clay King because I knew I would potentially throw, and knew that if I was going to throw, I wanted to have that with me because that is the best way to wire off my pieces.
You can stay on the soapbox as long as you want. I will forever praise the Ergo wire, especially the, what is this, the 3.5 inch?
Yes, that
Can't
is
be
the other
beat.
thing. Finally, a wire tool
Thin
company,
but
and
short.
granted, they make a bunch of other things, not just
Yeah.
wire tools, but finally, a wire tool company produced a shorter wire tool that you don't have to wrap around your fingers when you're trying to wire off cups.
Especially because when you, or if you're doing plates or anything where the clay's dried a little bit and you got to tug and then the wires on your knuckles and it
Yep,
hurts and it's digging into
it
your
totally
skin.
hurts. Yep.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And these don't really
It's
fray.
great.
I don't
No,
know if yours have ever frayed. Mine have
nope.
never frayed. And
Every
other
now
wire
and
tools
then,
definitely have.
if I mistreat her, she will kink.
True. That's fair.
But aside from that, she's a very trusty wire tool.
Yeah,
I've
that's a
personified
product
her.
I reviewed, and I think when I reviewed it, I was like, "Yeah, sure, a wire tool, whatever," and then I used it, and I was like, "Oh, oh,
It's
now I
the
get it."
sleeper tool coming out
It's a
for the
sleeper
win.
tool, 100%. Yep,
100% agree. Same page.
good, good.
Okay. So on this realm of content, social media, virtual education teaching, is there anything that you want to cover that we haven't covered or say that we haven't said already?
I think we've covered a lot. I would say the only thing that I would always like to reiterate is you don't know unless you try it, right? Just the concept that if you want to get into it, you want to start posting, just you have to. You have to start, right? If you don't start, you'll never see growth because you'll never have planted anything. So that would be kind of the reminder that I always like to add anytime I can.
Amen. And one other, if I could, it just came to mind.
Yep.
If somebody's trying and trying and trying and not seeing the results they hoped for, what would you suggest if they still want to continue trying and how to adapt or change or try new things?
I think one of the things I talked about in my Clay King social media workshop was coming up with a mission statement for yourself.
Hmm,
And so I think that's such an important thing to do when you start social media, because then if you have content that you feel isn't performing well, you can go back to your mission statement and say, okay, my whole goal of being on here is to connect with others. We'll use that as a generic example. And then you can look back at your content that perhaps didn't perform well and say, okay, well, are there elements in this content that were actively trying to help me connect with others? And it's a good way to kind of start to analyze what you're producing. Now, granted, like I said, there are some things like even filming quality and filming angles where it just does take some practice. But when it comes to the concept of your videos, I think it can be something that if you can root back to that mission statement, if you can try to pull yourself back to that, it can really help you analyze and guide your content. So you're not just saying, oh, this wasn't successful. You're saying, I see where maybe I could have asked a better guiding question that could have helped build that community. And that relates back to my mission statement.
I like that.
Good.
I'm going to internalize and process it. Okay, so before we move on to the rapid fire realm, I did put up a poll in Clay King's stories yesterday to ask people if they had any questions they wanted to share with you. And the last time I checked, it wasn't very, there weren't a lot of submissions, but I do want to go in here because I think I saw one or two, and I want to give them the opportunity to at least have their question voiced in public. And
Do it.
we're going to rely on my internet to be able to load because I think that story has archived at this point. So I'm going to pull it
Okay.
back up.
No worries.
Here we are. Yeah, so out of only over 1,000 views, only one person took the opportunity. And we might have already covered this, but I'm going to say it anyways. Ryn Ceramics, RYN ceramics, asks, how do you do it all? Do you sleep?
I don't. No, I do sleep actually. I have certainly gone through periods of time where I did not prioritize my sleep and those kinds of things. I've since realized that if you don't prioritize sleeping, everything else falls apart. You can't do any of it if you're not physically
Mm,
ready to do it. So I am someone that thrives with a calendar. If you've ever met me and you've ever seen my home or if you've ever seen my teaching planner, I thrive in a calendar. So, one of the things that I've started to do that's really helped me manage all of it is actually scheduling days when I don't do any of it. I
mm,
think when I was doing the Clay King workshop, one of the first things I said to put on your calendar is days that you don't want to post. And I would say you can do days that you don't want to make, days that you don't want to work on things for your classroom, and making sure that you are prioritizing those, make sure that you have them. I have certainly done the 7 days a week posting schedule. I don't recommend it. I don't think anyone should do it. Give yourself at least a couple days that you don't feel like you have to do things. And that can help because then your sleep's going to be better. You're going to feel better because maybe on that day you were able to go out to lunch with a friend, or maybe you're able to go do all of your laundry. That's what I typically
mm.
do on those days, and set yourself up for success so then you can do it all on the days where you're allowing yourself to do it all. I hope that makes sense.
That makes a ton of sense. And I think it's a fresh take on even just scheduling time out because mostly when I imagine people are creating calendars, they're putting things on them to do, not putting things on your calendar to have free.
Yes. Yeah, and
Mm,
it's something I've learned through failure, right? I have tried to just put the important things down there, right? And by important, I'm like those deadlines, right, that we have to have. And
yeah.
it took me really going through cycles where I'm like, gosh, why am I suddenly getting colds all the time, Well, it's because I didn't consider downtime to be an important thing. So now I do, now I prioritize it, and I think it's been a lot healthier for me to maintain all of the other jobs when I also am making sure to actually build in time for myself.
I think it's really good advice.
I hope so. I hope you guys follow it so that you don't have to go through cold seasons like I used to.
Like physical cold seasons.
Physical, I would get, oh, my migraines got worse. I would, because I wasn't sleeping well, I wasn't sleeping
Mm,
enough, so I was getting terrible migraines, and then that swipes out a day. So then you're like, well, I had a migraine day, so then the next day I need to do double of it's a
mm.
cycle. It was rough.
Yeah. Self defeating, vicious cycle.
Mhm.
Well, now we are in the round of the episode where we're going to fire some questions at you. And the goal is to get succinct, quick answers, top of the head, no thought.
Yep.
You ready?
Yep.
Okay. Question one. What is a mistake new potters make when they're trying to carve?
A mistake that new potters make when they're trying to carve is they carve every single piece, and in reality, you only want to carve the pieces that you have thrown intentionally to carve because they're thicker.
Hmm. Love that. What is the one classroom setup detail that pottery teachers forget?
The one classroom setup detail that pottery teachers forget is that it is important to make sure that you are in a place where the students can walk up to you easily and ask questions. Don't barricade yourself. Make sure that you are out and about and that you give the students physical access to you because then they will ask you more questions.
Oh, that's a great one.
I felt good about that one. Thanks.
Yeah, that was quick. That was nice. What's one pottery myth that you wish people would stop believing?
Oh my gosh. A pottery myth that I wish people would stop believing is the air bubble myth. I am over it. I could rant about that for a decade. I probably shouldn't because you want this to be short, but I wish people would stop.
What is the disconnect?
So essentially, the myth is that if you have an air bubble of clay, it will explode, and that is not true. You can fire entirely hollow forms just as well, as long as you make sure that the moisture escapes properly. So that is kind of your big thing there. I could be getting into hot water with this, but I'm going to say it anyway. When pieces explode in the kiln, it is seldom the student's fault. I fear that it falls more on us as the teachers, right? Because we have the ability to kindle kilns, run slow programs, do all of those things to guarantee success. I have not had a piece explode in years because I prepare that every piece is likely packed with moisture.
I can hear pottery teachers everywhere picking up their pitchforks.
I know. This is a hot take. People are going to be mad, but you know what? My students have made some chunky pieces, and those things always survive.
Love it. Stand by it. What's your favorite tool under $20?
Ooh, favorite tool under $20 is the Mud Tools white sponge.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's a great one. Hands down.
Yep.
What's one tool you could never teach or make without?
One tool I could never teach or make without would be, gosh, I wanted to rapid fire and say a pottery wheel, but you know what? I've tried throwing on a banding wheel and you can do that. It's not fun, but you can make it happen. Does clay count?
Clay counts.
Yeah. That would be the one, yeah, I could not create my work without clay.
Fair. What's in your Sula bag this moment?
Oh my gosh, can I show you?
Yeah.
Hold on. This is so good.
I feel like it's a taboo thing because I was raised never to ask a woman what's in her purse, but the Sula bag is a clay bag, so I feel like it's different. And
I'm so excited right now.
I'm glad you had
Okay.
that reaction and not like a,
Oh my gosh, no, because you want to know what's in this Sula bag?
I do want to know what's in the Sula bag.
A bunch of rhinestones. That is currently jars.
Oh, you actually have a jar of rhinestones in the Sula bag. Okay.
Oh, I have a jar of rhinestones. I have these trays of rhinestones. I'm bedazzling this bag now. I have bedazzled other Sula bags in the past with great success. So this is the trim that I'm working on. There you go. That gives you a
Oh
good
my
idea.
goodness.
Yeah. So currently my Sula bag is packed with rhinestones
In it and on it.
in it and on it, as it should be.
What's a pottery class routine that has totally changed the way your students learned?
A pottery class routine that has totally changed the way my students learn is starting the class by not immediately giving them instruction. I tend to like my students to come in and have a little bit of time to do what they need to do. So I try to give them kind of a break, pull out their materials, get started, get into their flow, and then I maybe give them some instruction, but actually avoiding them walking in and immediately jumping into it.
Hmm. I was curious about that earlier in our conversation. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
And what is one thing you wished you learned sooner as a potter?
One thing I wish I learned sooner as a potter is that it is okay to restart. I think there's a lot of in the beginning, people have a lot of attachment to all of their work and realizing that there's actually something very important about learning to look at pieces and say, you know what? I'm going to reclaim that one and to make something fresh. That is a skill that I think all of us maybe wish we could have expedited a little bit.
Oh,
We
yeah.
all have our chunky pieces we've held on to, and those have their place as well, right? But learning to kind of curate what I kept is something I wish I picked up on faster.
That's a good skill to have and a hard one to learn.
Very hard to learn, but so important.
Yeah. Okay, that is the end of my rapid fire questions. And
Ooh, fun.
kind of as we're wrapping up this conversation, I do just want to give you the floor. If there's anything exciting coming up for you that you want to talk about, what is it?
I am looking forward to school starting and I'm looking forward to getting back in that routine. I really
Hmm.
thrive in the school routine. I think it's so good for me, as you can probably tell through my love of scheduling. So I really love that. I'm very excited to get back to that. I'm excited to get back to my students. And I am also excited that my home studio is more put together for this school year than it was last year. We've only been in our house for a year now. So last year I felt like I was still very much getting used to what I wanted my home studio to look like. And this year, I'm very excited that it's mostly where I want it to be for the most part. So working in that space this year, I think is going to be really fun and really exciting.
It takes a lot of time and effort to set up a studio the way you want it. So
Yes.
I'm wishing all the best for you this year as you put it all together in the way that's most conducive to your creativity.
Thank you. Yeah, let's see how it goes, but I'm excited.
And it always changes.
Always. Everything's on wheels for a reason.
Good, good. That's the lesson I wish I learned sooner. Put things on wheels.
Oh, really? 100% agree. I feel like people commit to these very heavy, solid tables, and
Yeah,
they are not fun to rearrange.
no. This
No.
one that my mic is on right now is on wheels, and I love
Yep.
it. I'm going to move it when we're done with this conversation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's okay. We're going on a tangent, but I feel like it's important. That is the key to making a small studio work. Wheels,
Yes,
things on wheels,
not just
100%.
wheels,
Not
but
just wheels.
wheels.
Yeah, and casters, I guess, because you got to lock it in place.
Yes. And if there's anything that you could express to the pottery community as a whole, or also as a bite-sized version of just any one person, if we take a potter who's just starting, what would you say to encourage them if they're looking
the
to start on a similar path of life that you're on?
The thing I would say to a potter who's just starting is do not be afraid of talking to other potters and connecting with your community and diving into it. I would not have done any of the things that I have done if it were not for potters who welcomed me into their spaces, who
Mm,
invited me to learn with them and invited me to grow with them. I would say the pottery community as a whole. Now, don't get me wrong, we got some Fruit Loops. Everyone does, but really for the most part, potters are just the kindest people, the most willing to share. If you have a question, ask someone. The worst they can do is say no, Google it or whatever. But even then, Google it and you'll find so many online pottery communities to connect with. I would say my biggest advice is ask. Ask people, ask questions, talk with people, join the community. We are happy that you are here and we are excited to grow with you.
agreed. I've encountered very few gatekeepers in ceramics.
I would 100% agree. Most people are so willing to openly share everything, which is crazy.
Sometimes you'll get more than you ask for.
That is also true, and I tend to be that person, actually. If you ask me a question, I will sometimes write you back a paragraph and send you links. So sorry, but, most of us, I think it's just because we love what we do so much that we're like, "Yes, let me share it all."
It's exciting to be asked something that you're also excited about.
Yes,
Yep.
especially when it's something I don't know, because then I'm like, "Oh, I get to go research things," and I love that.
Hmm, same. Um, well, Hope, I just want to say thanks for taking the time that you have taken to have this conversation and answer all these questions. And I hope that it's been beneficial to somebody on the other end listening to us ramble back and forth about pots and teaching and creator spaces. But if they are wanting to know more about you or where they can find your work, where can
I am pretty much everywhere on all platforms as Limyansky Studios, but I will spell it for you if that's helpful. It's Limyansky, and then Studios is pretty easy. So I am that name on pretty much everything, and you can connect with me anywhere. I do my best to monitor all things. I am on Instagram the most often, though, so that's where you'll see me post more frequently than the other platforms.
Perfect. Well, if anybody has any questions, you can follow up with Hope through those channels or through us through the Madam House Studios channels as well. But just want to say thanks again, Hope, and I wish all the best as school starts for you and onwards in your creative endeavors.
And thank you for taking the time, and thank you for being one of the first brands to ever reach out to me about working together. Clay King has always held a special place in my heart, and I have loved getting to work with you over the years. And I really appreciate you and all that you invest into the pottery community because you and Clay King as a whole give back so much. And thank you for what you guys do.
Thanks. It's a joy.